Hello and welcome to today's session. Today, we'll be giving a quick overview of the backend flow in regards to a standard SDK and API integration. So the flow that you see in front of you is a very high level overview. This will probably fit nicely into your architecture at your side based on the different processes and systems that you have in your backend. But if we can just imagine that from a standard overview here, on the left-hand side, you've got your customer or your user. Your customer will register with yourself, and they'll probably go through a client app that you've created in order for them to register for the different products and services that you have. So here is where you'll be capturing the information about your customer, whether it's the first name, last name, address, email address, date of birth, etc. This is the information that you'll be capturing from your front end. Now, this will be processed to your back end, and then when Onfido are involved in the process, you will need to create an applicant ID. So the applicant ID is a unique ID associated for that specific applicant or user of your platform. So Onfido by default will need things such as the first name, last name, and if you do have areas such as date of birth or address, please feel free to pass that through to us via the API. If you do capture other data points that aren't accepted by Onfido, then you do not need to process that information through to Onfido. Now, once you've created the applicant ID or the applicant, we will provide you back with the applicant ID. Now, the applicant ID will be used throughout Onfido, and it will be the unique object that will be used in order to initialize the SDK, create checks, and retrieve information. So from here, once you have the applicant ID, you'll be able to create a JWT token. With that, you'll be able to create an SDK token, and combining the both together, you'll be able to then initialize the Onfido SDK. So the SDK here will be the front-end screens that will be presented to your customers, and what you'll be able to present, you'll be able to customize as well. So with this journey, I'll just use a standard document and selfie check. So once you've initialized the SDK, throughout this process, the user will then go through capturing the document, taking a selfie of themselves, and that information will then be processed back into Onfido's backend systems. Now, with this journey here, we'll be able to provide you back with on-complete messages via the app or the SDK that will tell you when the user has completed each of these steps. Once you've got the notification that the SDK has been completed and your customer has completed the journey, you can use this trigger as a way to create a check against that applicant. One thing to bear in mind here is that the create check is not an automated process after the SDK is completed. It is a step that you need to execute at your side once the user has completed the flow. So once you've completed or created the check against the applicant ID, that is when you're instructing Onfido to complete the checks based on the information that you want Onfido to validate against. Now, a number of our customers will implement webhooks, and the usefulness of the webhooks is that once Onfido has completed the check, we will be able to notify you via a webhook to say that this is now completed and you can retrieve that information. Checks can take anywhere between, on average, 15 seconds to around 5 minutes. Please note that this does vary based on your account setup that you have with Onfido, and it does vary against different products and services. Now, once Onfido has completed the check, we can provide you with the webhook. The webhook will contain the information for you to then be able to retrieve the reports from Onfido. We captured various information around what these reports look like in our previous session, but from here you can gather that information to your backend in order for you to make more decisive decisions on what you want to do with that particular user. Now, when we talk around best practices in regards to integrating. The applicant's ID, as I mentioned, is a unique ID. If it is the same user that is going through the Onfido flow again, the suggestion here is you reuse the applicant ID. That way you'll be able to see a clear record of who's gone through the flow, the checks associated to that particular user, and it will save you having duplicates running in the system at your side as well as on Fido's side. We did touch on webhooks to be used as a way to avoid yourselves requesting checks or updates from the checks from on Fido's side, and to help you avoid hitting your rate limits in Sandbox and also in production. The SDK goal is to ensure the best capture of the image of both the document and the selfie. Please note that there is no validation done during the SDK flow. So it doesn't necessarily check to see if it is the correct document that the user said they were going to upload. It doesn't validate to say whether or not it is a fraudulent document or not. All of that information is captured at the end once Onfido have completed the check and provided you back with that information. And lastly, as we touched on, creating a check is not an automated process. It is something that you need to trigger from your side once the SDK has been completed. Now, when it comes to sandbox testing, for the way to integrate via the API and SDK, if you're just using API integration or you just want to test it via the API, then these are some helpful tips and flow that you can use. Please note that you do need to create the applicant, and then you have the possibility to use the upload endpoints to upload a document and selfie if you do not want to use the SDK at this particular point in time. And then you'll be able to create checks, set up your webhook, and retrieve that information. A couple of areas to note in regards to sandbox testing is that by default, there is no validation done in Sandbox. So what that means is the default response you will get from Onfido will be a clear, so the happy path. So if you upload a document, we will say that is a perfectly good document that has been uploaded. There would be no validation that is completed. Now, there are ways in order for you to force unhappy paths, and there are limitations here. But on the bottom of this slide, you'll be able to see the 2 links where you'll be able to get a better understanding around what is possible. And we also give you an example document to use with Onfido. But the advantages are that you're able to test in a safe environment with Onfido. The sandbox data is segregated from your live customer data, and there's no actual validation done against any document or selfie that is uploaded at that point. Thank you.